My name is Elaine Porter. I am 65 years old, a mother, a widow, and someone who thought she had already faced the worst life could hand her. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I saw him standing in my daughter's living room. It was her engagement party, a night that should have been filled with nothing but joy. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, and then my own hand betrayed me. The champagne flute slipped, shattered against the floor, and the sound echoed like my heart breaking all over again. Because when I looked up, I saw the man who had once stolen not just my money, but years of my peace. There he was, smiling, charming, moving from guest to guest as though he belonged in our lives. And I realized, with a chill I could not shake, that this man was now calling himself Evan Carlisle, and he was engaged to my daughter Natalie. I had thought predators were easier to recognize after living through one. I had thought experience would protect me, but I was wrong. This time, I would not run. This time, I would not let him take the person I loved most. I began to plan. 7 years before that night, I was not the woman I am now. I was 58, newly widowed, and trying to keep my head above water in Seattle's endless rain. My husband, David, had died suddenly of a heart attack. One moment I was pouring coffee. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway staring at a doctor's lips moving without sound. Everything I thought was secure slipped through my fingers. Those months blurred together grief counseling sessions, sleepless nights, the ache of waking up alone. And then, one afternoon in a little coffee shop near the counseling center, a man sat across from me and smiled. He looked safe. He looked like someone who understood pain. He asked about my life, my loss, my future, and for the first time in months, I felt seen. His name back then was Dylan Cross. At least, that's the name he gave me. He carried himself with kindness, with patience, with the kind of attention that can make a grieving woman believe she matters again. I let myself believe. For 10 months, he was my comfort, my distraction, my lifeline, until I realized he was draining more than my loneliness. Bit by bit, he had been emptying the life insurance money David left me. By the time I discovered it, I had lost $75,000. Money meant for stability had become the price of my naivety. The night of Natalie's engagement party should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. Her smile lit up the room. Her friends and colleagues filled the space with energy, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe she had found the kind of love that would keep her safe. But then my eyes landed on him, and the ground shifted beneath me. Evan Carlisle, that's the name he carried now. But beneath the expensive suit and polished introductions, I recognized Dylan Cross. The same piercing eyes, the same charm that once convinced me I was the exception. And now, he stood at my daughter's side, holding her future in his hands. My stomach turned as I remembered the trust fund that would mature in 18 months. David had left her nearly $27,000 money that was meant to secure her independence. Suddenly, I understood why this man had resurfaced, why he had placed himself in Natalie's path. I wanted to scream, to tear away the mask in front of everyone. But I knew if I moved too fast, I would lose her. If I stayed silent, I risked losing her forever. 3 nights later, I found myself awake at 2 a.m, the glow of my laptop casting long shadows across the kitchen. I typed his new name into every search bar I could find, expecting to uncover years of business dealings, news mentions, Something? But Evan Carlisle seemed to appear out of thin air in January of 2020. Before that, there was nothing. No records, no photos, no trail. For a man who claimed to be a successful investment consultant, that was impossible. The emptiness of his digital footprint made me more unsettled than any scandal could have. People always leave traces. He had either scrubbed himself clean or built a new identity from scratch. And either option told me the same thing he was hiding. I needed help. So I called a private investigator named Gloria Ruiz. When we met, she laid out her findings in neat folders. Every tax document, license, and rental agreement for Evan Carlisle started in 2020. But when she pushed deeper, she found something chilling. The same pattern kept showing up in different cities. Phoenix in 2020, Nashville in 2022, Denver in 2023. Always women between their late 20s and mid-30s. Always quick engagements. Always sudden disappearances 1 week before the wedding. It was more than coincidence. It was a method. And now, my daughter Natalie was next on his timeline. Sunday dinners had always been my anchor with Natalie. A quiet tradition. Just the two of us. Comfort food and conversation. But that evening, the atmosphere was different. Evan insisted on cooking. He moved through her kitchen with practiced confidence, plating an elaborate Italian dish as if he were auditioning for a role. I watched him carefully, trying to see past the charm. Every detail of his performance felt calculated, from the way he praised Natalie's success to the effortless laughter he shared at the table. When he spoke about cooking, he compared it to building trust slow, patient, letting the flavors blend naturally. I almost laughed at the irony. He wasn't talking about food. He was talking about people, about women like me, like Natalie. Then he slipped. As he spoke casually about his past, he named the same cities Gloria had traced: Los Angeles, Phoenix, Nashville. He didn't realize he was confirming her timeline, tying himself directly to the pattern. I smiled politely, but inside my pulse quickened. Every word he gave me was another piece of evidence. I kept my voice warm, my expression pleasant, but silently, I was cataloging everything. I knew then that dinner was not about bonding. It was surveillance. Not long after that dinner, Natalie came to see me. I could tell before she even stepped through the doorway that something had shifted. Her voice carried a sharpness I had rarely heard from her, and the words she spoke felt rehearsed, as though planted there by someone else. She accused me of being suspicious, of prying too deeply into Evan's life, of not trusting her choices. Each sentence stung because it didn't sound like my daughter. It sounded like Evan. The distance I feared was already forming, and with every breath she pulled further away from me. Then came the blow that hollowed me out. She told me it would be better if I didn't attend the wedding. My daughter, my only child, was uninviting me from the most important day of her life. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and taken something irreplaceable. I cried that night in the quiet of my kitchen, the way I had after David died. But grief quickly gave way to anger, and anger hardened into resolve. Evan wanted me gone. That could only mean he was planning something big, something that required me out of the picture. I picked up the phone, called Gloria, and told her we needed to act fast. He had underestimated me. He thought I was beaten. He was wrong. I knew I couldn't confront Evan head-on without proof, but I also couldn't sit quietly while he tightened his hold on Natalie. So I staged what looked like surrender. I called him and arranged a private lunch, telling myself this was my chance to study him without the safety net of others around. I played the role of the contrite mother, softening my voice, admitting I might have been unfair. He seemed almost relieved, leaning into the image of himself as the misunderstood fiancé. He spoke about second chances, about how he had once loved a woman who reminded him of me older, grieving, vulnerable. The words slid across the table like poison wrapped in silk. And then came the moment that chilled me. He said her name, not Elaine, but another Margaret-like alias, the very name I had used during that painful chapter of my life. He remembered everything, and he wanted me to know. In that instant, I understood. He wasn't oblivious. He had recognized me from the beginning. This wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. The remorse he wore wasn't growth. It was another mask. I left that lunch shaken but strangely steady. He thought he was in control, weaving a story of redemption. But what he revealed told me the truth he hadn't changed. He had perfected the act. Gloria called me back a few days later, and the heaviness in her voice told me everything before the words even came. What she had uncovered was worse than either of us expected. This man wasn't just scamming women for money. He had been targeting families. Each victim she traced had a relative who had already fallen into his web. A sister here, an aunt there, a cousin in another city. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. He wasn't content with ruining one life. He was dismantling entire family lines, as if proving he could erase trust across generations. That's when Gloria introduced me to Agent Thomas Kim, an FBI investigator who had been quietly tracking Evan Dillon for years. Sitting across from him, I felt my stomach twist as he laid out the data. 6 women tied to him in the last 5 years. And almost all had suffered more than financial loss. Bankruptcies, breakdowns, accidents that didn't look accidental when you lined them up on a chart. Agent Kim told me something I couldn't unhear. Statistically, the number of deaths and disappearances linked to his timeline was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. It wasn't just theft anymore. It looked like elimination. The weight of that truth pressed down on me. Natalie wasn't simply at risk of losing her money. She could lose her life. To draw him out, I decided to make myself look weak. With Leah's help, word quietly spread that I had taken a small fall at home. Nothing serious, just enough to keep me resting for a few days. The plan was simple: make Evan believe I was no longer a threat. It worked almost too well. The very next afternoon, he appeared at my door with a pot of homemade chicken soup and a carefully measured smile. He acted concerned, spoke about family taking care of family, but every word felt rehearsed. I sat there in my robe, forcing my body to look smaller, more fragile, while inside my pulse pounded like a drum. As we sat together, he leaned closer, lowering his voice in what he must have thought was a moment of intimacy. He spoke about how fragile life could be, how Natalie might need someone strong to lean on if something ever happened to me. The message was clear. I wasn't just an inconvenience. I was expendable. The recording captured every word, but I knew it wasn't enough for a courtroom. Still, it was proof of intent, and it was enough to confirm what I already feared. The FBI told me we had one chance to catch him with his mask off. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only way. I agreed to wear a wire, to meet Evan in a setting where he would feel safe, and to push him into revealing the truth. Agent Thomas walked me through every detail. I would enter his apartment on Saturday evening at 7 o'clock. The team would be stationed nearby, listening to every word. My job was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. I had to make him believe I knew everything and that I was ready to tell Natalie. His pride, his ego, would do the rest. That night, as I packed the small transmitter into my bag, I let myself whisper the fear out loud. I was afraid. Yes, but I couldn't back down. I thought of Natalie as a little girl, her hand wrapped around mine, trusting me to keep her safe. That memory steadied me. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was her shield, and I was ready. When I walked into Evan's apartment that Saturday evening, the first thing I noticed was how impersonal it felt. No photos, no books, no keepsakes. It looked less like a home and more like a hotel room someone had borrowed for a short stay. That detail alone told me what I needed to know. He never intended to stay. I sat across from him, steadying my breath, and let the words come slowly. I told him I knew his real name, Dylan Cross. I listed the cities, the women, the timelines. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw the predator beneath the stillness of a man calculating whether to run or to strike. Then the charm returned, smooth as glass. But I had already seen the truth. He tried to dismiss me, but I kept my voice calm, my facts precise. I recited names he thought were buried, details he believed no one could tie together. I could see the tension in his jaw as I refused to back down. Then, almost like he couldn't help himself, he leaned into the arrogance that had kept him going for years. He boasted. He told me Natalie had already signed paperwork, transferring her trust fund to a joint account. He said that by 9 o'clock Monday morning, he would have access to $27,000. That was the confession the FBI had been waiting for. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I held his gaze. I let him think he had won. Because in that moment, his pride was the rope tightening around his own neck. The moment the words left his mouth, the door burst open. Agents rushed in, weapons drawn, their voices commanding him to stand down. Evan froze, but even then he didn't panic. He smirked, as though confident he would talk his way out like he always had. But then I heard a voice that made my knees buckle, Natalie's. She stepped into the room with 2 agents at her side. Her face was set, her eyes sharp with fury. In that instant, I realized she had known more than she had let on. She looked at him, not me, when she spoke. She told him the papers he bragged about were nothing but props provided by the FBI. She had never signed away her future. Her trust fund was exactly where it had always been. The confidence drained from his face like color fading from a photograph. For the first time, he was speechless. Then she turned to me, and I saw both anger and love in her eyes. She had played her part perfectly, waiting for proof, protecting herself while letting him believe he had won. Together, we had set the trap. That was the moment I understood he hadn't underestimated just me. He had underestimated us. 2 years later, the case finally closed. In the courtroom, I listened as the judge sentenced him to life in prison for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and 6 confirmed murders. His real name was revealed as Dylan Cross, and the list of victims stretched back more than 15 years. Families came forward, broken yet relieved to see justice served. Some carried photos of daughters, sisters, mothers who would never come home. For me, it was the end of a chapter I had carried for too long. Natalie stood beside me through it all, stronger than I had ever seen her. She rebuilt her life with more caution, more boundaries, but also with hope. She had faced deception and walked away unbroken. When I look back on everything, what stays with me most isn't the fear or even the anger. It's the reminder of how fragile trust can be and how strong family bonds truly are. Dylan tried to break us apart, to turn Natalie against me, to isolate her the same way he had done to so many others. But in the end, it was our bond that brought him down. I realized something important along the way. Protecting the people you love doesn't always mean shielding them from pain or truth. Sometimes it means trusting them to see things clearly when the time is right. Natalie didn't need me to fight every battle for her. She needed me to stand beside her, even when it was hard. Together, we found our way through. Today, Natalie lives with more wisdom, and I do too. Love is beautiful, but love without awareness is dangerous. Trust is powerful, but trust without verification can be a weapon in the wrong hands. If my story leaves you with anything, I hope it's this: listen to your instincts and never let fear silence you when someone you love may be at risk. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, please like, share, or leave a comment below. Your voice matters more than you know.